consumption, investment, government spending, productivity, input prices, government regulations? What do these have to do with agri demand and agri supply? Well, join me for review and practice of agri supply and agri demand as we get ready for the upcoming AP macroeconomic tests. And it doesn't matter what format of the test you're taking, because tonight's review session is based on content and skills. So if you need something, get yourself something to write with, to write on. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get this adventure going. So here we are. So what are we going to learn? Well, the first thing we're going to learn is, who is our instructor? Who's this person in the upper right-hand corner of my screen? Well, that's me. I'm Gabriel Sanchez from Bonita High School in Laverne, California. Go Bearcats. I'm retired from the classroom, but not from life and economics. So let's get learning. Let's do some reviewing. Let's do some practicing. Let's get this going. So on our agenda for today and our review session, we're going to look at ADAS model review. The first thing we're going to do is look at the ADAS graph. After we look at our graph, we're going to look at the determinants of both aggregate demand and aggregate supply. We're going to look at the three different possibilities of equilibrium in the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. We're going to look at the effects of changes to aggregate demand and aggregate supply and the changes that occur to the price level, output, and employment. And we're going to do all that by practicing with free response questions. We have 3 questions we're going to work on. So let's get to it. Let's get going. Let's get reviewing. Let's get this party started. So here it is, aggregate demand, aggregate supply graph. This is the graph you need to know. And on the exams, they will always ask us to have a correctly labeled graph. So what does that mean? Correctly labeled, we have our axes labeled, vertical price level, horizontal real GDP. All 3 curves are labeled, long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, aggregate demand. And then the points of equilibrium, price level is traditionally labeled PL, and output or full employment will be Y or YF. Now, that being said, on your actual test, they may ask you to label price level PL1 or PLE or output Y or full employment YF. Whatever they ask you to graph, that's what you should do. So that's the graph. We're going to be drawing it a couple times tonight in some questions. So look at it, make sure you know it. Let's keep going. The determinants of aggregate demand. Now, when we have changes in determinants, we get changes in aggregate demand. So when we have changes in consumption, we have changes in investment, we have changes in government spending, we have changes in net export. These changes will cause the aggregate demand curve to shift. As we see, the curve has shifted from AD to AD1. As the curve shifts from AD to AD1, we see the results is that we have an increase in output from Y to YF and an increase in price level from PL to PL1. So when there is a change in any of these determinants, components, or factors of aggregate demand, the demand curve will shift. As the curve shifts, we will then get new equilibriums and have new results of our output, our employment, and our price level. And just like we have determinants of aggregate demand, there are determinants of aggregate supply. And when we have changes in these determinants, we will get the supply curve to shift, as we can see here. So when we have changes in productivity, when we have changes in input prices, when we have changes in government regulations or business taxes, that will cause changes in the supply curve. And here we can see short run aggregate supply shift from SRAS to SRAS1. And when that shift occurs, we can see we have new output from Y to YF and from PL to PL1. And so these are the results that happen when the determinants of aggregate supply and or aggregate demand change. We will see changes in, again, output, employment, and price level. Now, the economy can be in basically 3 different states of equilibrium. And the first state that we'll look at is full employment, or it's also known as long run equilibrium. And as we can see here, this is where the short run, the long run, and aggregate demand all form an equilibrium. And you will see it in questions quite often referred to as either full employment, long run equilibrium, or they will use both terms, full employment, long run equilibrium. The second point of equilibrium we can be in is in a recessionary gap, or the economy is in a recession, and we are less than full employment. And one way I always remember this little tip is we are to the left of the long run and we are less than full employment. So keep your L's. We're to the left, we're less than the long run. And so as we can see, Y1 is to the left of YF, which is full employment. The third state of the economy that we might see, looking at aggregate demand and aggregate supply, is an inflationary gap or an inflationary economy, or we are now operating beyond full employment. Here we can see that Y is operating beyond full employment, beyond YF. Here we have equilibrium to the right of the long run. So those are the three states of equilibrium. They can either be inflationary, recessionary, or in long run equilibrium. So let's look at an example. We're going to look at just on a couple slides, a couple parts of questions, just to get us warmed up before we get ready to get into actual practicing complete questions. So I call this slide State of the Economy. And what I wanted to do is put up here to show you how a question may be asked on the test, and to give you the state of the economy after we just looked at the three graphs. Now you can see it in a written form. And so they tell us that Canada is an open economy that is currently in a recessionary output gap. So where would this be in equilibrium? To the right, to the left, or on the long run, recessionary? We'd be to the left. Next, assume that the economy of Artland is currently operating above full employment. So here we have inflationary. This is to the right of full employment. Another example would be, assume that the economy is in long run equilibrium. And so here they tell us right there, long run equilibrium. So here we can see from previous questions of the past how it might be asked. And again, the three that we've looked at, recessionary, inflationary, and long run. I want to show you a couple more, just sometimes they'll ask things or state things a little bit differently. So here we'll talk about that the unemployment rate in the country of Southland is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. So we have more unemployment than we naturally should. So that would be recessionary. And then the last example to look at right now is assume that the United States economy is operating at full employment output and the government has a balanced budget. A drop in consumer confidence reduces consumption spending, causing the economy to enter into a recession. So we would start this economy. They tell us we are at full employment. There we go. Then something happens. One of the determinants, consumption, it changes. There's a drop in consumer confidence. There's a drop in consumption. What does that do? That causes us to enter into a recession. And so our new equilibrium would be to the left of the long run. So here were just some examples to see how it has been stated in the past and what we're looking for on questions on your AP test. All right, now we're not starting a complete question. Here I just wanted you to see a graphing start of a question. And so now's the time, if you're going to be graphing along with me, make sure you have your pencil and paper or iPad or whatever you're using and start graphing along. So Canada is an open economy that is currently in a recessionary output gap. A, draw a correctly labeled graph of the long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, and aggregate demand curves and show each of the following: the current equilibrium real output and price level, labeled as Y1 and PL1 respectively, and full employment output labeled YF. Now, you have a couple options. One, you should be drawing right now as I'm talking. But tonight during questions, if I'm going a little bit ahead of you or if you need a little bit more time, please feel free to pause. But I have a feeling I'm going to try to do this so that you will not need to. So right now you should be drawing long run, short run, aggregate demand, show your two axes, make sure they're labeled. And then when you have your equilibrium of your recessionary output, make sure that you label your output Y1, your price level PL1, and full employment YF. Something else before I put up the answer, I put, and tonight in questions, you'll see I put these verbs, I guess we'll call them, in light blue. This is what the question is guiding you to do. These are the key words that the College Board looks for. They want you to draw, correctly label. We need to show. And we'll look at these throughout the evening. So here we go. I'm going to get ready to put up the answer here. So ready, go, let's show. There we go. This is what we were looking for. This is the correct graph. Here we have price level on the vertical axis, real GDP horizontal. We have all three curves labeled, and the show points that they're asking for, PL1 is correctly in the right place and labeled, Y1, YF. All right, this is what we're looking for. This was our preview. We're going to get ready to start. So hopefully you feel good about this. You can draw this graph right here. All righty, so let's practice, let's go. Let's get our first of three questions going. Here we go. So 1, assume the United States economy is in recession. A, draw a correctly labeled graph of the long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, and aggregate demand curves, and show each of the following: the current price level labeled PL1, the current output labeled Y1, and I have down here C graph because we're going to see the graph in just a moment. So you should be drawing, but if you drew the Canada graph in just a moment ago, you would see that that was in a recession. So the graph that you just drew, you can use right now. If not, I'll give you a few seconds to get it drawn up. But again, remember, output is Y1, current price level PL1. They are not asking you to label YF on this one. So draw your graph. Here we go. I'm ready to show. Here's the answer. There we go. So here's your graph. You should have this drawn. And again, our axes are both labeled. The three curves are labeled. We labeled PL1 for the price level. We labeled Y1 for recession. It is to the left of the long run. This space here from Y1 to the long run where I have my cursor, this is our recessionary gap. So that was part A. All right, we good? Let's keep moving. Part B. Now, assume the Eurozone, a major trading partner of the United States, enters into a recession. What will be the effect on United States exports to the Eurozone? Explain. So something at this point in these questions, when they ask you what will be the effect on the United States exports, this now becomes a 4-choice, multiple choice question with an explanation. So will the effect be on the United States that United States exports, they can either increase, exports can decrease, exports can remain the same, or exports are indeterminate, and an explanation. So think about what is it? Increase, decrease, remain the same, indeterminate. All right, I'm going to put the answer up. And again, if you need to pause, pause. Here we go. Here's our answer. The United States exports will decrease because the fall in income in the Eurozone will reduce the demand for United States goods. So what is happening is in the Eurozone, there is a recession. Income has dropped in the Eurozone. And so one way to remember this, or a teaching tip, is for a country, for individuals, when our income increases, we buy more foreign goods. When our income decreases, we buy less foreign goods. In this question here, the Eurozone's income has decreased. So they will import less goods. And since the United States is the trading partner, the US will export less. And so the US will suffer because of that, because there's less demand for US goods. All right, that's BI. Let's move on to the next part. BII. On your graph in part A, show the effect of the change identified in part BI on real output in the United States. Now, before we go any farther, please do not draw a new graph. Quite often, students will want to go and draw a new graph. You've already drawn it correctly, and they've told us right here on your graph in part A. So look at your graph from part A that we've already drawn, and now you're going to shift either the aggregate demand curve or the supply curve. It'll either be an increase or it'll be a decrease. And after you make your shift, you'll need to have a new equilibrium, a PL2 and a Y2. So go ahead, make your shift. If you need to pause, pause. All right, here we go. Here's the answer. So as you can see, the aggregate demand curve shift to the left, or we had a decrease in aggregate demand. And as aggregate demand shifted to the left, we can see a change in the output from Y1 to Y2. We can see a change in the price level from PL1 to PL2. And on this question, they asked you to show. So here on the graph we showed with the new AD1, with Y2, with PL2, we have shown the effect that we saw from BI. So that was BII. Next, BIII. What will be the effect of the change identified in part BII on unemployment in the United States? So again, what will be the effect? Again, a 4-choice, multiple choice question, and they are not asking for an explanation. So unemployment in the United States can either increase, unemployment can decrease, it can remain the same, or it can be indeterminate. So we saw in part II that aggregate demand decreased and shift to the left. So think of your answer. Here we go. The answer is unemployment in the United States will increase. When we saw aggregate demand shift from AD to AD1 and output change from Y1 to Y2, employment decreased. As employment decreased, unemployment increased. And one of the things to be aware of on the test is quite often, look at what we're asking for. Are they asking what happened to employment or what happened to unemployment? And in this case, they're asking about unemployment, and unemployment will increase and employment decreases. All right, let's move now to the last part of this question. Part D, the United States implements a combination of expansionary fiscal and monetary policies. In the absence of complete crowding out, what will be the effect of these policies on each of the following? I, aggregate demand in the United States, II, price level in the United States, and III, interest rates in the United States, explain. And again, this effect question is a 4-choice. So what will happen to aggregate demand? Increase, decrease, remain the same, indeterminate. And there is no explanation needed. It is just the assertion of your answer. So think about what has happened. We have a combination. We have expansionary fiscal. We have expansionary monetary. What do expansionary policies do to aggregate demand? Here's the answer. The answer is aggregate demand will increase. Both policies are designed to increase aggregate demand. And so by the stem of the question stating expansionary, we should know that both of those policies will move the demand curve to the right and increase it. In double I, what will happen to price level? Well, look at your graph. If we've increased aggregate demand and we've shifted it to the right, what does the graph tell us? What happens to price level? Ready? Here we go. Price level has also increased because as we increase aggregate demand and move it to the right, if you look at your graph, the price level will increase, and it increased from PL1 to PL2. Now, triple I, interest rates in the United States, explain. So what you need to look at is separately and then put them together is what effect does expansionary fiscal policy have on interest rates? And they show us the term crowding out. What effect does monetary policy have on interest rates? And put them both together. Increase, decrease, remain the same, or indeterminate. All right, here we go. Here's the answer. The answer is that interest rates are indeterminate and the policies have opposite effects. Expansionary fiscal policy will cause interest rates to increase. Monetary policies cause interest rates to decrease. We have policies moving in opposite directions or in different directions. And so we don't know exactly what will happen. So for that reason, interest rates are indeterminate. All right. Well, that was the first question. Number one is done. That's behind us. One down, two to go. Let's keep moving in our review and practice. Let's go one more. Let's go another question. Here we go. All right. So we're going to assume that the economy of Anderson-Land is in a long-run equilibrium with full employment. In the short run, nominal wages are fixed. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the short-run aggregate supply, the long-run aggregate supply, and aggregate demand curves. Show each of the following. Equilibrium output labeled Y1, equilibrium price level labeled PL1. So you should be drawing your graph right now. As I was reading the question to you, we are in long-run equilibrium. Make sure you have long-run supply, short-run aggregate supply, your demand curve, label all three, put your two axes, horizontal and vertical, and label our long-run equilibrium output at Y1 and price level at PL1. All right, are you ready? Are you ready to show? I'm gonna go, we're gonna show, see what you've done. All right, let's see the graph, it's telling me, let's go. All right, here's the graph. And again, price level, real GDP, long run, short run, aggregate demand, PL1, Y1. We showed the points that the labeling that they wanted. We've done everything that they've wanted right here. All right. Part B, assume that there's an increase in exports from Anderson-Land. On your graph from part A, show the effect of higher exports on the equilibrium in the short run, labeling the new equilibrium output and price level Y2 and PL2 respectively. So again, you do not have to draw a new graph. You just have drawn it. Now what you have to do is decide, am I shifting aggregate demand? Are we shifting aggregate supply? Make your shift. You should have a new equilibrium for output and price level. Label those Y2 and PL2. All right, if you need to, pause. I'm gonna get ready to show us the answer. It says see the graph, so here we go. We're gonna see the answer, ready, go. Let's see what we know. There we go. So aggregate demand increases. Net exports is a determinant of aggregate demand. The aggregate demand shifts from AD to AD1. As it shifts to AD1, we see the price level increase from Y1 to Y2, and we see the price level increase from PL1 to PL2. All right, so this is what we were looking for, the new demand curve, the correct placement of output and price level. All right, that was part B. Let's move to part C. C, assume that the economy of Anderson Land is in the long run equilibrium with full employment. In the short run, nominal wages are fixed. So based on your answer in part B, what is the impact of higher exports on real wages in the short run? Explain. And again, what will happen to real wages? Real wages can either increase, decrease, remain the same, or be indeterminate. And this one also needs an explanation. So we have higher exports. We saw aggregate demand shift to the right. They tell us that nominal wages are fixed. That's why this is here. That's why I put the stem of the question back so you can see nominal wages are fixed. You got an idea? You think so? All right. If you need to pause, if not, here we go. I'm going to show the real wages will fall. And the reason they'll fall is because the price level has increased and the nominal wages are fixed in the short run. If you remember on the graph, aggregate demand shifted to the right. That raised the price level. Price level increased, but nominal wages are fixed. And so we don't have that adjustment there. So real wages will fall in this case. So that was part C. Now let's go to the last part of this question, part D. As a result of the increase in exports, export-oriented industries in Anderson Land increase expenditures on new container ships and equipment. What component of aggregate demand will change? And what is the impact on the long run aggregate supply? Explain. So they first want to know, since Anderson Land is spending money, they are buying new container ships and equipment. Where do we consider that to be going on? We know that there's an increase in net exports, but now is this a component? Is this an increase in consumption, an increase in investment, an increase in government spending? It's a three choice. So pick one: consumption, investment, government spending. What do you think? Here's the answer. It's investment. This is investment, these new container ships and equipment. They're investment of using and producing things. So what will be the impact on the long run aggregate supply of this increase in investment, this increase in new container ships and equipment? Give an explanation. And again, the long run can either increase, decrease, remain the same, or it's indeterminate. Think about it. Where does this all play? A little bit tougher question. All right, here's the answer. Here we go. The long run aggregate supply curve will shift to the right or increase. And this happens because the capital stock has increased. And the key thing for this answer here is this increase in capital stock is what will increase or shift the long run aggregate supply curve. So these container ships and equipment is capital stock. When we increase capital stock, long run aggregate supply will increase and shift to the right. All righty, that was 2012. Number 3, that was our second question. Now we're down to one more question, the last question of the evening. And guess what? I promise you, you do not have to graph in this question. No graphing, all right? Let's get to it. Let's look at this third question. Here we go from 2010. So how does each of the following changes affect the real gross domestic product and price level of an open economy in the short run? Explain. So our first one, A, an increase in the price of crude oil, an important natural resource. So if there's an increase in the price of crude oil, what does that do to real GDP and to price level? Now, I know there's a graph there. I told you not to graph and you don't have to graph. I did the graph for you. I'm doing the graphing. And the reason I put the graph there is I want you to see as we can answer this question with one sentence, we can at the same time look at the graph and get the exact same information. And I wanted you to see this final connection between a sentence we can write with words and a graph that we can draw. And in either case, the same information is being transferred across. So if we increase the price of crude oil, is that a demand function or an aggregate supply? All right, are we ready? What's going to happen in this situation here? Real GDP will fall and the price level will rise because the increase in the price of oil raises input costs and causes the short run to shift to the left. So if we see on the graph here, the short run shift to the left, it's a decrease in supply. Inputs is a determinant of aggregate supply. We have higher price of inputs, supply decreases as the curve shifts to the left. The price level increases, real GDP decreases. And one way, a little tip you might use is when in doubt, graph it out. The graph will give me the answer every time. So the other side to look at is we wrote this answer with just one sentence, and we also showed on a graph here. But again, they were looking for the sentence here. I want you to see the graph to see everything all together. So that was A. Let's go to B. Here we go, B. A technological change that increases the productivity of labor. All right, so again, is this a demand shift? Is this a supply shift? Yes, I have the curve there just to help you if you'd like. Which one is this? What is going to get shifted? Aggregate supply, aggregate demand, a change in productivity. All right, do you have an idea? Here we go. Let's go ahead and take a guess. Let's put the answer up. Here we go. GDP will rise and the price level will fall because the increase in labor productivity reduces unit input costs and causes the short run aggregate supply to shift to the right. So as we can see here, productivity is a determinant of aggregate supply. If we increase productivity, we can produce more at less cost. That is an increase in supply. The supply curve will shift to the right. As the supply curve shifts to the right, we can see the changes in output from Y1 to Y2. So we have an increase in real GDP. We see the price level change from PL1 to PL2. So that's a decrease in the price level. So again, here we can see what the graph is showing us and what we can write here in one sentence. When in doubt, graph it out. All right, let's get to part C. We are almost done. Part C, an increase in spending by consumers. Increase in spending. Is that aggregate demand or aggregate supply? Make your choice, make a shift. What happens to price level? What happens to output? Are you ready? Here we go. Here's the answer. I know you know it. GDP will rise and the price level will rise because the increase in spending causes aggregate demand to shift to the right. An increase in spending or an increase in consumption. Consumption is a determinant of aggregate demand. As we increase consumption, aggregate demand shifts from AD to AD1. As AD shifts to AD1, we get new equilibriums. We get Y2 and PL2. So we have an increase in real GDP because we go from Y1 to Y2. And we have an increase in the price level from PL1 to PL2. And finally, the last part of this question tonight, part D, the depreciation of a country's currency in the foreign exchange market. So depreciation of a currency, what does it have to do with aggregate demand and aggregate supply? Look at my determinants of demand, look at your determinants of aggregate supply, and let's see what do you think? What is going to get shifted? Demand, supply, currency, what does it have to do with it? Do you have an idea? Well, let's go ahead and put the answer up and then we can discuss it. GDP will rise and the price level will rise because the depreciation of the currency will cause net exports to rise and aggregate demand will shift to the right. Net exports is a determinant of aggregate demand. When the country's currency depreciates, that means other countries' currencies will appreciate. Those other countries can now buy more of their currency at a lower rate, which means price of goods and services to the buying country are cheaper. So exports will increase. So we have an increase in net exports. As these net exports increase, aggregate demand will shift to the right. And as we can see, an increase in output, an increase in the price level. Okay, that was it. That was 2010. Those were our 3 practice questions. All right, so now, what should we take away from what we've looked at today? So let's sort of go back and look at everything and see if we can put this all together and move on. The one thing we know we have to know is the graph. The graph gives us all the information. Whether we have to draw the graph or not, we need to understand the graph. And so again, a correctly labeled graph, we have all 3 curves labeled: long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, and aggregate demand. We always want to make sure our axes are labeled: price level, real GDP, and also our points of equilibrium, price level, and YF. And at this moment, I'll just want to say that regardless of whether it's aggregate demand or aggregate supply, any graph that you need to draw in this course needs to be correctly labeled. And so correctly labeling is axes, curves, and points of equilibrium. So this is just practice, not just for aggregate demand and aggregate supply, but for any graph you have to draw. To get full credit correctly labeled, make sure you've hit all of those points. We talked about determinants of aggregate demand, and that when you have changes in consumption, you have changes in investment, you have changes in government spending, you have changes in net export, this causes a change in aggregate demand. And when you have a change in aggregate demand, that will have a change in output, a change in employment, and a change in price level, as we can see here. And just like we have determinants of aggregate demand, we also have, we can see that again, change output, change price level. And again, we have determinants of aggregate supply. And when we see changes in productivity, we have changes in input prices, we have changes in government regulations. Those will cause changes of the supply curve when the short run aggregate supply curve shifts, as it does here from SRAS to SRAS1. We can see the change in output from Y to YF, and the change in price level from PL to PL1. We also looked at the 3 equilibrium points of the economy. It can only be in one of 3 places. 1, long run equilibrium, full employment. As we can see here, long run, short run, aggregate demand, 1 equilibrium right here, full employment, there we are. So that's one state of the economy. The other state of the economy is a recessionary gap, or we are less than full employment. Here we can see that Y1 is to the left or less than. And remember, we are to the left and we are less than the long run. So think about your L's. This is a recessionary gap. And finally, the last choice is beyond full employment. Here we can see Y is to the right of full employment, to the right of the long run. This is an inflationary gap. We are beyond full employment. So my final thoughts for you. First, trust yourself. You know this, you've been studying, your teachers have worked hard, you took the time to come and review with me today, you're gonna do great. Trust yourself. Make sure you read each question carefully. Take the time to read it, look what they're looking for. Take your time, you'll be fine. Breathe. Go ahead and take a breath. Sometimes we'll look at a question, all of a sudden we'll get flustered. It's okay. Take a breath, close your eyes, breathe. You'll get through this. You're going to be fine. Do what the question asks. And that's why I put things in blue throughout tonight. If they ask you to identify, explain, calculate, draw, show, label, plot, indicate, whatever they ask of you, do it. It'll make it easier for you, easier for the reader. You'll be much, much more successful. And again, trust yourself. You know this, you've studied hard, you'll do well. I know you will. So trust yourself, you'll be fine. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate you watching today, taking the time to be with me. Make sure you watch the next video in our series, video number 3, which is graphing and explaining long-run self-adjustment with Mr. Matt Romano. And with that, work hard, keep studying hard. Hopefully you got something out of this today. Hopefully I could have been some kind of help to you. And with that, go out and be good people. Until next time.